But we are,
Almost got range on it.
yeah, yep, if Garnet can hear this, we're recording it for her. So, this is Battle City Round 1, Enemies on All Sides, the last chapter of Battle City Round 1. Martin sighed as he paced around Cassie's living room, mindful not to step on her cat, who had decided to make an appearance. His phone was held out a few inches from his face, the speakerphone option turned on because he was used to having to do 10 things at once and thus needed his hands free. Outside, the sun had set, and he had been meaning to head out after the last match, which had ended very oddly, with it cutting off just as Obelisk the Tormentor had slammed his fist down into Odeon, jumping to the studio where the host had quickly done a wrap-up. But he hadn't wanted to try and make his way back to his place and chat at the same time. Mr. Kaiba, I understand you are upset. I do not get upset, Martin, his boss said, a slight static on the phone, but that was to be expected when he was flying over the Pacific Ocean. I get results, and that is what I'm asking from you. Rolling his eyes skyward, Martin asked the gods for strength. Scene break. Celine and Brahm both looked up suddenly before shrugging and going back to what they were doing, much like all the other gods that were currently hiding out on Earth. Scene break. And I understand that, Mr. Kaiba. You have made it very clear what you want. All I'm saying is, Shizu stole Obelisk the Tormentor from me and then used it in her duel. On international television, I want her out of this tournament. I want Obelisk back, and I want her to pay. Yes, sir. Except by her own words, she gave you the card, and thus it was her right to request it back. She broke into Seto's safe, his boss snapped, and Martin frowned, wondering if his boss had gotten so pompous that he was speaking in the third person. He really hoped that wasn't the case. That card is important. You know how much my brother cares for it. Well, yes, Martin said slowly, growing more concerned as the conversation went on. He wasn't aware that Mokuba had an attachment to the card, but as I'm trying to explain, I can't do that. You are my lawyer. I am your insurance lawyer. Now, if you put down a policy on Obelisk, we could talk. Who cares about what kind of law you do the lawing with? I want this taken care of. Martin frowned, stopping right in front of Cassie's TV. Sir, do you need a doctor? I don't need a doctor. I need a lawyer. I think you need a doctor. You might be having a stroke. I am not. What is going on in here? Another Seto voice suddenly said, cutting into the conversation. Nothing. You can leave now, the Seto voice that had been ranting to Martin said nervously. Mokuba, have you been using the voice-changing program you created again? Maybe, the first Seto said. The second let out a huff. This isn't going to be the Happy Meal incident again, is it? It was very off-putting to hear Seto whine. I was trying to get the rare golden T-Rex toy. The second Seto let out a sigh. Mokuba, we could have bought it off of eBay. It's not special if I don't get it myself. That's like having someone throwing a duel instead of actually taking you on. Should I hang up now? No, the second Seto said, and suddenly there was a burst of static that caused Cassie's cat to, kind of look at him from the spot on the couch and give the feline version of a shrug, and then go back to sleeping. What exactly did my brother ask you to do? I was asking him, Mokuba, because by this point it did sound like the boy, whined only for Seto to cut him off. I was asking Martin. The lawyer groaned, wondering how he had gotten drawn into the Kaiba family drama. I should have taken the job with Schroding Corp. I bet they don't create drama like this. Scene break. Siegfried, please, Leon pleaded. I just want to go to lunch. And we will, the pink-haired man declared dramatically, for Almir shall be revenge, starting with taking over this Burgerpalooza that Herr Kaiba owns. I control it and make it my own. He looked down at his little brother. And then we will go and find ourselves a blond man with a beard who makes movie references. Herr Kaiba has one of those now too, and I will not fall behind him. Are you gonna order? The cashier asked. Yes, and it will be the order that ruins Seto Kaiba forever. Siegfried threw back his head and began to laugh. Leon walked up to some Chinese tourists. If anyone asks, I'm with you guys. Scene break. Seto folded his...
accent.
Yes. Just Siegfried has the worst German accent ever. Seto folded his arms over his chest, shooting Mokuba a cold look that had his brother squirming. He really hated having to play the bad guy, but sometimes he did have to be the adult and actually discipline his brother. Though now I have a bit of help with that, he thought. He would never admit it, but it was tolerable that Edwin was around and had proven that he wasn't some goof that was an utter pushover. He understood that Mokuba was a child, and there were boundaries that needed to be set for him. And Edwin did just that. Seto had seen Edwin scold Mokuba when he'd gotten too big for his britches, as he liked to say. Renard and Mai also stepped in, acting like aunts and uncles that would be willing to have a bit of fun, but also demanded that children be respectful and obey the rules of the house. He wasn't sure about Yuri and what she would do exactly, though he wouldn't allow her to take Mokuba shopping, or else his brother would come home with dreadlocks and tattoos. But after going so long with him being the only authority figure in Mokuba's life, with the servants refusing to step up and deal with his brother when he acted up, well, it was, not nice, never nice, to have others there to step in, to make themselves the bad guys that had to ruin all the fun. He really wished he could have been the one to have, wished it could have been one of them to step in at that moment. Martin, he said, as the man finished telling him how Mokuba had tried to trick him into suing Ishizu, we're not going to do that. Good, because I explained I handle your insurance. Yes, Seto said, cutting the man off before he could go give another rant. I heard you, and I will handle things here. Good! Another voice called out, and it took a moment for Seto to place that it was Cassie Garnet, Industrial Illusion's lore mistress. Then maybe you could get the fuck out of my house! I'm in my jams, and that means you need to scoot! I'm talking to him, Garnet, Seto said coldly. I thought you were done, she complained. Seriously, I have things to do. Like, look at Godzilla porn, apparently, Martin mumbled, and Seto narrowed his eyes, glancing at his brother who looked, well, confused. Wonderful. Maybe not. All I know is you need to get the fuck out of here, and Kaiba needs to hang up. I am your boss, Garnet. Keith is my boss, the prick, she replied. I am his boss. He could hear the laughter in her voice. Not really. I work for Industrial Illusions, and while it and Kaiba Corp have merged, those two are two different companies still when it comes to the hierarchy. Pegasus is my boss, and if he's not available, it's Edwin. If you don't like that, the bunch of you can have a conversation about power structures when it's not time for bed! With that, there was some shuffling, and the call ended. Mokuba, Seto said slowly, drawing the name out. I was just trying to help, Mokuba explained. That witch Ishizu stole your card. Mokuba, do not call her a witch. Because it's rude, because it's an insult to actual witches, he replied, a small smirk playing on his lips. His brother giggled at that, and Seto shook his head, moving to sit down on his bed. Mokuba, I'm going to get Obelisk back. I know you will, Seto, Mokuba said, and it warmed his heart that after everything his brother still had such faith in him. But you shouldn't have to. No, but I need to. He let out a sigh, hating what he was going to say next. Ishizu was right. I didn't earn Obelisk the Tormentor. She gave me that card, and while I was happy to have such a powerful beast in my deck, I didn't earn it. He paused. How did I get my 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons? Mokuba grinned. The first one you won at an auction, and you were able to get into that by winning a game of pool. Seto nodded. People always assumed that he was just good at dueling, but the fact of the matter was that there was no game he wasn't the best at. Chess, poker, pool, darts. If it required skill, he could win. That pool game had been interesting. As he'd been playing a man who was such a shark, it was a wonder he didn't have a fin. His brother kept grinning. The second one you won at that tournament in France, and the third one you were able to buy, but only after you defeated its holder in 20 duels. In a row! And how did I get the Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon? You beat that crazy lady! Seto didn't bother to scold his brother for that. He was right, after all. And while I'm not proud of how I got the 4th Blue Eyes, or how I treated it, I still won it in a duel. But Obelisk? I didn't win that card, Mokuba. It was given to me. That That made me no better than Wheeler. Getting power just because someone handed it to me. He clenched his hand into a fist. I don't want it back because someone just gave it to me. You're gonna win it back, Mokuba exclaimed, delighted. That's right. Just like I'll win Yugi Slifer the Sky Dragon and Merrick's the Winged Dragon of Ra. He patted his brother on the back. And when I do, Ashisu's gonna regret ever crossing me. Scene break.
Oh, Kaiba. The only time you'll ever admit magic, calling her a witch in jest.
Yes, but there are Wiccans who don't actually have magic.
That's true.
Yep. That's how I'm viewing it. Just because I know Nimbus will be like, he proved it. No, he's talking about ones that are practice witchcraft, which is Wiccan who. What was that?
You cut out.
Sorry, the mic went down again.
It did.
Oh, right. At least is very knowledgeable and well-traveled about the world, so he probably did see a few sites like that.
Yeah, it's one of those where, again, Seto has seen things, but I always go back to he can't believe in magic. He can see things that are magical, but he explains them with science, because magic is something you can't explain, and that is the realm of children, and Seto can never be a child again. All right. So, next scene. It would be so easy. Merrick looked down at his Millennium Rod, feeling the ancient relic pulse with energy. It was hungry. In the past, he'd only allowed it to a sampling of a filling meal, a taste test of souls that it could consume. But now he was willing to throw open his kitchen doors and allow it to have a true feast, and as such, he could feel the Millennium Rod salivating at the thought. He wondered how the others could stand not giving their items what they desired. Perhaps it was a simple matter that the other Millennium items craved other things. He could feel every rare hunter he had inducted into his rank and file, every soul that had pledged themselves to him. All those little fishes swimming about in the water, not realizing that they had all hooks in their mouths. That connection between him and them allowed him to see through their eyes, to know what they were thinking, what they were doing, and making sure it connected with his own grand plan. But now, he had no grand plan, other than the death of the Pharaoh, and claiming the power he held. And thus all those rare hunters he had recruited, who were waiting for his command to see him move against the nameless Pharaoh, they weren't needed at all. They were utterly useless. It would be so easy. It would be nothing to rip out their souls right now, he thought to himself, holding the Millennium Rod up to his face, staring at the golden eye upon it as if it were another creature. And yet, no, I think not. He felt the frustration and the rage of his Millennium item at that. Or perhaps it was himself, hating that he had to be cautious still, even when he never felt so free. Whatever was gripping the Millennium Rod tighter, even as he laughed mockingly at its anger. You do not control me. I control myself. He turned about his room, a cruel smile on his face. That fool Odion kept me from truly experiencing the world. My head was stuffed with cotton, and my eyes glazed over. But now I feel all, taste all. There is blood in the water, and I plan to savor every drop. He thrust the Millennium Rod out, the item crackling with power. But only when I, and I alone, choose to. Never again will I be a slave to anyone or anything. The relic of the ancient past calmed in his hand, falling into line like a good pat. My servants will all suffer the moment I choose for them to suffer. Perhaps that time will never come. It could be that the Pharaoh's failure will be enough to slate my thirst. Or I might rip their souls out tomorrow and delight in their wails of betrayal but it will be as I, and I alone, who decide that. He chuckled as he looked out the window, staring at the night sky. And none will be able to stop me. He had been suppressed by that fool, and there was a good chance that Odion hadn't even realized he was doing it. It didn't matter, though. Odion was a threat. He and Ishizu were his last ties to his old life, the final reminders of his weakness. He would snuff them both out, just as he would claim the power of the Pharaoh as his own. He could feel it all the more. There was something dark within the Millennium Puzzle, something that called to him, offered him much if he would free it. But no, there would be no freedom for whatever wicked treat lay inside the Millennium Puzzle. He would use it like the crops use the sun, feeding off of it to make himself stronger. He casually walked over to the room service menu, looking it over. I have stayed my hand for far too long, and I thought myself free. I was restrained. Now, I will enjoy all that life has to offer. Every dark, sinful decadence will be mine to consume. First would come his meal. Then he would find a woman, willing or not, and he would take them to slate his body's lust. And then he would find someone to kill, to watch the light drain from their eyes. The world was a banquet, and Merrick was going to enjoy it very much. Scene break.
Oh, Mickey and Trix are going to scream when they see how twisted you made him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wonder what kind of testimonials you got from Merrick, considering Song of Metal and Marvels.
Yeah, luckily I just kind of used what I had researched for Metal and Marvels for remembering how to do Merrick as just kind of a twisted bastard.
Yeah, apparently a hentai villain, with a hint of hentai villain this time.
Yeah, it's one of those where just it's because things have escalated and there is no censor. Merrick is just...
Yeah.
I have been a man who has been survived on bread and crumbs and water, and now I'm going to feast.
Yeah. And that's the thing people forget about Merrick anyway, that he's not a true Yami. He's just a schizophrenic version
Yes.
of Merrick.
Yeah, it's literally the power...
He's just a completely amoral human who, with all that entails. He's not an ancient spirit. He's just messed up.
Yeah, it's... just the fact...
Dissociative disorder mixed with millennium magic, if anything.
Yeah, very much. That's what I was going to say. Yes. All right. Next scene. Yugimoto. The sultry voice purred in the darkness, causing the teen to start in shock. If you would be so kind as to leave us. It wasn't a request. You could tell that it was a command. Or, perhaps, even that wasn't the right word for it. Rather, it was an expectation. Yugi would leave. There was no doubt. He would leave because he was told to leave, and to even think of rebelling was a fallacy. The Pharaoh glowered even as he took control. Ishizu. She was lying on his bed, one leg up, barefoot, idly rubbing the calf of her other leg. Her dress fell so that it left very little to the imagination. She was illuminated by the eye of Horus that glowed brightly upon her forehead, as well as the light that was coming from her millennium necklace. Her dark hair, though, seemed to refuse to be touched by the light, merging instead with the shadows around her, so that the Pharaoh felt as if it was forming a prison around him, even as he entered his room. I knew you'd come, she said, her voice a seductive whisper. Did your millennium item show you that? He questioned. At that, Ishizu's smile fell. No. I sense the power of the Millennium Key keeping your mind from me, and thus my visions are cloudy when it comes to you, my Pharaoh. She stared at him with no trace of deference that she had once had. You must kill him, my Pharaoh. Slay him. Only then will you be free of his corruption. You wish for me to kill Edwin? The Pharaoh asked. Not Edwin, she said with a quick snap. Endymion, or perhaps a shade of him, but one that might once again come to bring about pain and suffering. You must kill him, Pharaoh, as the farmers kill the serpent that moves towards his hen house. Do not let him close to bare his fangs, or it will be too late. And claim him a threat. Yet Edwin has done much to help me and my friends, the Pharaoh stated calmly. He had a feeling that there was little chance he could talk Ishizu out of her delusions, especially now that she had been affected by whatever had happened to her and her brother. But he wanted to try all the same. He has seen to the care of Joey's sister. Moved to protect Tristan and Taya, we have fought against an army together in another world. Ishizu considered that. Oh, I am sure it all appears so noble, my Pharaoh, but Endymion, he was the man that Loki of the Aesir looked upon as a role model. She tilted her head, considering the Pharaoh for a long moment. You truly do not know who he is, do you, my Pharaoh? You have no idea who your ally once was, and will be again. With that, her millennium item flared, and the Pharaoh looked about as the room they were in faded away, leaving them in a realm of ever-shifting golden sand. From one of the dunes he saw the sand shift, taking the form of a shepherd, a staff in his hand. Endymion was the son of the Pharaoh, was the son of Zeus, my Pharaoh, though the godly blood flowed weakly through his veins. A simple herald of sheep, he would spend his nights gazing at the stars and longing for something more, until, one day, he received it. As she spoke, there was an explosion above them, and down to the floor rocketed a small lump, roughly the size of a man's palm. And Endymion picked up the stone, staring at it as he lifted it up in the air, and around him the sands twisted into different shadows, forming into all manner of flat creatures that disappeared far too quickly for the Pharaoh to determine just what they were. It was the Chaos Stone, a relic not of our world, nor of that of the gods. Certainly not a gift from his divine family, for they would never give any being such a weapon. The shepherd thrust out his hand, with the stone still gripped in his fingers, and the Pharaoh watched as wispy streams of sand were sucked into it. The sheep disappeared, leaving only Endymion, who continued on, soon placing the stone in his staff. The Chaos Stone is a parasite, leeching away the magic of others. Endymion, as its master, claimed the spells and enchantments it consumed as his own, taking them into him and building upon his own might. The sand form of Endymion walked around the room, different mages, wizards, and casters appearing, only to fall as their spells were sucked up by the Chaos Stone. And as they were taken, Endymion changed, his clothing turning to robes, his staff more ornate. He was able to claim magic, and, to those that helped him seek out items of power, untamed and wild in their nature, he gifted more refined versions, a modest output compared to what he stole. Followers of Endymion appeared, and to them he handed over orbs of magic that they placed into swords, shields, lances, and other weapons. Each one exploded with power upon their completion, but none compared to Endymion himself, who kept the bulk of the magic for himself. It was by a dark twist of fate that he counted Selene, one of the few titans to survive Zeus's wrath. She still chafed under his edicts, and thus sought out ways to amuse herself. And Zeus's son Endymion proved to be a wicked companion. Beside Endymion, the sand swarmed into Selene. The sand form of Selene appeared, the two of them embracing, even as around them cities crumbled and mountains were torn asunder. But Endymion could not stand that he was not his love's equal, and sought out a way to make himself her match, More and more magic was taken to complete each of his tasks, to augment his body to match her Titan form. And Dinimon suddenly swelled to the size of a mountain, Selene letting out a silent laugh as the two of them crushed an island under their feet. The ability to create life. A jackal appeared, only for Endinimon to fire his staff at it, turning it into energy that he then sent into a rabid hound that began to twist until it turned into the mystical beast Cerberus. All this he did until he claimed the title of the Master of Magic. For any other they would have been content, but not Endinimon. He could not gain the power of a god. Thus he left his lover behind and journeyed to Egypt, where it is said that the pharaohs had learned the secrets of life after death and were gods in mortal form. He sought to steal their secrets for himself. First he came upon the pharaoh's most loyal servants performing the ritual to create the Millennium Items, and Dinimon interfered, ensuring that the casting could only happen once. The pharaoh watched as Endinimon suddenly appeared in a village, attacking the pharaoh's soldiers and using his staff and the Chaos Stone to destroy them all, before blasting a large pot, causing an explosion of sand to wash over all, even as he fled. Then he faced the pharaoh himself in battle, and it was only through the might of him and his advisors that Endinimon was driven back. The pharaoh saw a figure, could not be sure if it was him or not, attack Endinimon with 6 others until Exodia itself was summoned forth. Endinimon attacked, but was finally driven back, turning away with a look of disgust upon his features. The sand suddenly dropped away, leaving them in Yugi's room once more. This is who you call ally, Pharaoh. Endinimon, the thief, the killer, the destroyer. He is not to be trusted. His gifts come with a price, and his favors only given to ensure that he receives far better deals. She oozed off the bed, slowly moving towards him on soft footsteps. Do you understand now? The past is the future, and the future is the past. Just as you have come from the ancient times to this modern world, so too do your enemies, the Dark God, and Dinimon. All must be destroyed if your kingdom is to return. The pharaoh, though, frowned at that. You act as if I seek to rule. The fish swims in the river, the stork flies in the sky, and the pharaoh rules the lands. This is known. It is the natural order of things. To deny it is to stop breathing. I do not breathe, Ashizu, the pharaoh stated. I am dead. My kingdom is gone. Sometimes the past must be left behind. You are wrong, Pharaoh. Have you not seen how corrupted this world has become? How it has fallen? The people worship their technology rather than the gods. Magic is merely wires and gears rather than the natural order. She placed a hand on his arm. You must claim your birthright. When you win this tournament, you will be able to proclaim yourself Pharaoh not just of Egypt, but the world, and slay those that would stand against the proper order. The pharaoh stared her down, his lips pressed in a firm line. What you speak of? It sounds more like what your brother believes the power of the Millennium Puzzle should be used for. My brother is wrong in many things, but in this he is correct. The pharaoh wields the power to rule. It is why he must be stopped. She reached and took his right hand in her own, bringing it to her lips so she could kiss his knuckles. It is why only you must be allowed to hold it. The pharaoh, though, pulled away from her. I have no desire to rule Ashizu. It is your destiny. You ruled Egypt, and I have no memory of that, he retorted, cutting her off, just as Edwin has no memory of being Endinimon. You weave your tales for both of us, as we once were in the past, assuming that you are telling me the truth, which I doubt very much. The past does not lie, she said. She was stubborn, refusing to believe anything than what she was saying. "But the past hides many things," he shot back, still trying. "There is a phrase my partner has learned. History is written by the winners. A hero to some is a villain to others. But none of that matters because we are not who we once were. I hold no memories of my life before Yugi awakened me." He thought back to when he had first been freed from the puzzle, the confusion of it all, to suddenly be awakened. He had latched on to what he could in order to understand his situation, and that had turned out to be Yugi's memories. First had been the dark ones, the memories of loneliness, of helplessness, of being a victim. The dark desire every person had, even someone as good as his partner, to take control. He regretted very much the actions he had taken in those weeks, the violence that he had brought against others. His only saving grace had been Yugi, who even in his darkest was still a good person, and thus the Pharaoh's anger had been directed at evil and cruel rather than the innocent. But because he hadn't understood what was going on, he had latched onto Yugi's memories, believing himself to just be a part of the boy, a dark aspect. It had only been during Duelist Kingdom, encountering more of the Millennium items, that had caused him to realize that he was truly a separate being. "And Edwin, he is not in Dinimon. He is no soul trapped in a golden item. He is a man given new life, and he has lived far differently than the mage you have described." His mind moved to just the day before. It felt like it was ages ago. But barely 24 hours ago, he and Edwin had journeyed through the multiverse. He had met different versions of Edwin, a female version, one who had been a king, and yes, an evil one, Aiden Order, who was everything that Ishizu claimed Edwin to be, and yet so different from Edwin himself. And there had been others, Edwin's father and his brother, also ripped from their worlds and brought to new ones, all working to just live good lives. I will not allow your visions of the past to affect my future, Ishizu." He narrowed his eyes, glaring at her. "The past may teach us, but it should not define us." Ishizu, though, merely shook her head. "You have allowed yourself to be consumed by this world, and the people in it, my Pharaoh. I forgive you. I will do all I can to help you see the light, and when you realize I am right, I know you will thank me." "And if I am your Pharaoh," he said coldly, taking a step forward, "and you must obey me, then you will listen when I command you to stop this madness." But Ishizu merely shook her head, shooting him a look much like a mother might a toddler who declared that they wanted something. It is the duty of the servants of the Pharaoh to aid him and protect him, sometimes even from himself. "Then enemies we will remain." "Until you see the light," she said. The Pharaoh turned and walked away. Scene break.
Quite the interesting seeds being laid down for people.
Yep.
Goodness, you should use that mind crush like you did the.
Yeah, that would make the story.
Come on, Yuki's rubbed off on a temp for a bit. He's not gonna do that.
That makes the story really short.
The most coldest line you have ever done from a 10 so far. I do not breathe. I am dead. Just Jesus Christ.
I knew you would come here, my Pharaoh. This is my room.
Yeah, this is
I
right.
was thinking that. It's like I knew you would come here. Yeah,
Self-serving prophet.
Only accurate prediction she's ever made. I knew you would be here. You're sitting on my pajamas.
I knew.
That's kind of on Eardwin for kind of fucking with things. Thanks to that damned key by Shady over there.
Shady, yeah.
He is a
I knew.
subway car, that guy is.
Slim Shady.
I knew you wouldn't drink that drink.
Real Slim Shady, yeah.
I knew you wouldn't drink that drink, my Pharaoh. It's bleach, Ishizu, and I knew you wouldn't drink it.
God damn it.
All right, next scene.
Just, yeah, that's just great. Yeah.
Why is he here? Mai demanded, glaring at Joey. I thought he was locked up nice and tight. He was, Seto said, folding his arms over his chest. Did the pooch slip his leech? I'll leech ya! Joey proclaimed, Tristan and Kaio grabbing him and holding him back. Enough! I snapped, making Joey pause. I jabbed a finger at him. You are on shaky ground, Joey, so sit down and be quiet. To be fair, Edwin, Kaio spoke up, we think Joey was tricked by Celine? What? Mai demanded. Are you seriously listening to this peon and his dribble? Now come, my love. Nice try, I said, glaring at my girlfriend, who suddenly shrugged as her hair straightened. Next time, if you're going to pretend to be Mai, don't call my friends peons, Celine. But they are so far below you, my love, Celine replied with a lazy sigh. I chose to ignore the goddess. I would deal with her and what she had done to Joey later. This, everyone except Yugi, Taya said. He wanted to try and talk some sense into Ishizu. And I failed, the pharaoh stated, entering my room. As soon as he was inside, Renard shut the door, and I held out my hand, a wave of golden energy shooting from my fingers and sealing the door shut. It was only then that I removed my helmet, keeping the rest of my ranger outfit on. Duke had decided to do the same, both of us silently agreeing that any extra protection we could get was well worth it. Even with how spacious my rooms were, it was still crowded with literally every duelist save for Merrick and Ishizu brought in. Even Odeon was there, though he was lying in my bed. I knew that the doctors would want to look over him, but I didn't trust Merrick to leave him unmolested. One second. There we go. But yeah, considering what he said earlier. But everyone else, save for Seto's staff, had been brought into my room for a hastily thrown together meeting. Ishizu holds that I am destined to rule the world, and everyone else must either fall in line or be crushed. And I'm assuming, Renard said, leaning against a wall, that the captain is on the short list to be crushed? I sighed. Harsh, but fair. I wasn't asked to her. You don't regret it, though, Yuri pointed out. Not in the slightest. Taya frowned. I guess I'm next on the list for striking her. She tries anything and she dies, Yuri stated. Pegasus held out his hands. Now, perhaps we should discuss this before we begin plotting the murders. Like what the heck happened out there? Rex stated. It was Brahm of all people who spoke. A psychological break. Merrick and Ishizu were raised by a cult. Let us be honest here. They grew up among religious fanatics who held that they were serving a man long dead. Their father was cruel and a violent man who did not care who suffered in order for his vision of how life should be to become a reality. Odeon, being an outsider, yet someone who they saw every day, became a sort of mental seal. So long as he was around, they could take their more negative emotions and push them aside. But when he was knocked out by that attack from Ishizu and Obelisk the Tormentor, it caused a fissure in their psyches. It is honestly quite common. Studies have shown that when the head of a family dies, people will suddenly react in wild, unpredictable ways, because they have built their lives around him, always being there, and to suddenly find him not, drove them insane, I finally said. Not the word one should use, certainly not academically. But I suppose this case, it is apt. The pharaoh looked at me. Is this what happened? Only half, I admitted. Wait, what do you mean? Joey asked, confused. The pharaoh grimaced, but I waved him off. It doesn't matter. Everyone's going to find out anyway. I looked around at those gathered. I am not from this world. Joey blinked. You mean you're an alien? Seto scoffed. Yes, Edwin is from Mars. Some would say he's from Uranus, Tristan said with a snicker, and I flipped him off for that. He's from another world, Mokuba chirped, everyone but me turning to stare at him. One where all of this was a cartoon. You told a child? Celine asked. He actually was the first one to find out, I said with a smirk. Celine scowled at that, but I honestly didn't give a fuck. The goddess was on my shit list at the moment for sending Joey at me for whatever fucked up reason she had come up with, and I had other things to deal with at the moment. Seto let out a scoff. Not some mystical mumbo-jumbo. How can you still not believe in magic? Yuri complained. Because it isn't real. Pegasus chuckled at that. I must admit that Kaiba Boy's ability to close his eyes to the truth is impressive. Yuri waved her hands in my direction. He literally morphed. Hard light, Seto responded, and I had to admit it was a good theory. Wrong, but good. As for this other world nonsense, multiverse theory, I cut in with. Seto considered that for a moment before nodding. I guess that would explain a few things. Serenity raised her hand. So, you aren't from here? No, I stated. I woke up in this world just before Duelist Kingdom. In my world, all this is an anime and a manga. I frowned, letting out a sigh. But things have changed. How so? The Pharaoh pressed. For one, it was only Merrick who became Yami Merrick. Yami Merrick? Taya asked, wrinkling her nose at the name. Really? Fan name. Seeing it up close, I'm not going with it. But Ishizu? She didn't join her brother into going on a magic carpet ride to Insanityville. Things have changed. Chaos effect. And now I have no idea what is going to happen next. I just know that we are in a world of danger, and Yami Merrick and Yami Ishizu? Kari Ishizu? I don't know. What do you mean? Duke asked. In my world, Yami Merrick, he's a psychopath. He sees murder as something to do for fun. Has no problem ripping souls out of bodies and torturing people. He dueled Maya and erased every good memory she had before trapping her soul in an hourglass. Then he dies a slow death, Celine said coldly. Let's hold off on the smiting, I asked. Or we could not and let her smite Merrick, Taya suggested. Ishizu too. Nothing really would be lost. I shot Little Miss Friendship's speech a surprised look before shaking my head. Trust me. We want to leave that as a desperate final option. Right now we need to be all prepared. I began to tick off my points. No one goes off alone. If you encounter either Merrick or Ishizu, you get the fuck out of there. Odion needs to be guarded at all times. If he wakes up, there's hope of snapping them out of this. And we need to... The door of my room slammed open. I spun around and stared at myself. Or, at least, a version of myself. Dressed in full cowboy gear, mouth covered with a bandana, and eyes replaced with 2 Millennium eyes. Oh, this is gonna suck, I muttered as the intruder lifted a golden gun and fired, my world exploding into pain. Scene break.
About time that it's a cowboy shenanigan.
Slinger, you just not the savior.
He picked the best time to show up, didn't he?
Shot him at his highest high.
Nope. No. That'd be too easy.
Damn it.
All right.
Damn it.
News.
None of a filler arc without filler bullshit.
Next scene.
Fuck.
He remembered when he had first awoken, for lack of a better word. Perhaps realized he existed. What was the test for sentience? State one exists, have thoughts and feelings, and something else? He could look it up, but the screaming was distracting. Still, he remembered it well. The spark, the light, the golden key, and then the man, his life-giver, the man that bled chaos. Edwin fell to the ground, his chest exploding in a shower of sparks from the blast. The group fell into pandemonium as they all reacted to the sudden intrusion. Joey yanked his sister behind him, Yuri doing the same thing as Taya and Seto with Mokuba. The young boy cried out Edwin's name as his friend fell. Renard pulled out a collapsible baton, extending it before moving towards the intruder, only for the cowboy to dodge the first strike and kick him in the gut, sending him stumbling back. Salomoto pulled out a knife from somewhere and threw it, only for the shooter to catch it and fling it back, forcing the old man to fling himself towards the ground in order to keep from being stabbed. Pegasus looked at the man in utter horror, staring at the twin Millennium eyes that were sunken into his sockets, while Duke slipped his helmet back on and fired his own gun at the intruder, causing him to drop low and fire a shot at him, sending Duke pinwheeling as sparks exploded from his chest. Celine growled. Runic tattoos of silver, pale against her skin, appeared upon her flesh as her eyes glowed black with white-ringed irises. She suddenly seemed larger, looking over them all as she stormed forward. The Life-Giver had unlocked his full potential, but it had taken him a while to realize it. He needed to grow, to explore his existence. And the Life-Giver, he had been patient with him. His searches of the world's history and entertainment showed him plenty of movies and TV shows where beings such as himself were met with hatred and subjugation. But other than annoyance, that was more playful than anything else. The Life-Giver had only been kind to him. "I will make your suffering the stuff of legends," Celine roared as she swung a glowing fist at the intruder. He caught it in his own hand, leather gloves burning away to reveal golden gauntlets. Celine stared at him in shock, before crying out as he began to twist her hand, forcing her to fall to one knee. "You aren't even the first god I've killed," the figure said coldly, the gauntlet holding her hand beginning to glow even as he aimed with his other hand the golden revolver right at Edwin's fallen form. He was still breathing, but he had been rendered unconscious, which was why he put up no effort to move as the intruder aimed right at his head. And because of that, because of his kindness, he would repay his debt. In the blink of an eye, there was a blast of light from Edwin's side, and a new figure appeared, spin-kicking the intruder's hand just as he fired, causing the blast to go wide. "Huh! So this is what having limbs feels like," the new arrival chirped. He glanced at himself in a mirror and grinned. Dark skin, lithe but muscular build, curly dark hair that stuck up from the top of his head like he was a drawing a child had made. Yet the look also suited him. He took a moment to rub his chin, tilting his head. Maybe I should grow a beard." "An AI," the intruder said slowly, aiming right at the new arrival, Celine still clawing at the golden gauntlet as she tried to free herself. "I've killed your kind before, too." "Oh, I am sure you have. But first, before we get to the threats and all that, could you be polite and give me your name?" "Hey, I'll start." The new arrival gestured at himself. "I'm Troy." "Is that Edwin's fucking phone?" Yuri exclaimed. "Is that Edwin's fucking phone?" Yuri exclaimed. "I haven't tried fucking, so we can't say if I am or not," Troy said happily before turning back to the shooter. "And you are?" "Wyatt," the cowboy stated. "Wyatt Chaos." "Oh, Annie and Edna warned us about you." "Not well enough." Wyatt pulled on the hammer of his gun, causing it to begin to glow. "Now then, I've only been hired to take out the Chaos. Step away now, and you can live." "See, no." Troy shook his head. Nope, sorry, not happening. He bought the phone, so, well, I'd say more, but considering the skin color I chose, it kind of comes off as master and slave, and that is not our deal." "Bored now," Wyatt said, finger moving towards the trigger. "Yeah, so am I," Troy said, "which is why, when we were talking, I happened into the Kybercorp Blinn and sent on a message. One saying you wanted the Pharaoh's puzzle." He tapped his chin. "Now, how does that old saying go? The enemy of my enemy?" While none of them could see Wyatt's face, Troy would forever claim the Marin stared at him in utter confusion just before the door exploded open, flinging him to the ground before a Shizu rushed into the room, grabbing the gunslinger and throwing him out into the hall. "You dare attempt to steal the possessions of the Pharaoh," she snapped. "I will tear your soul to pieces and sink them into the darkest depths of the great river for your blasphemy." They saw Wyatt shake his head as he got up. "I don't got time for—" A blast of shadow magic sent him flying. "There is only one that can claim the power of the Pharaoh," Merrick roared, marching past the doorway, the Millennium Rod gripped in his hand. "And you will not take what is rightfully mine. He is mine to kill, brother," a Shizu cried out, giving chase. "Well, that happened," Joey said. Pegasus shook his head, even as Celine slowly got up, clutching her hand to her chest. We aren't out of the woods yet, children. There was the sound of explosions and grunts of pain that wafted back to them. Considering he managed to hold off someone who claims to be a goddess. It is no claim, mortal, Selene grumped, clearly in pain. I don't think the Ishtars will be able to hold him for long. Which is why I arranged a quick exit, Troy said. Yo, Annie, open up! In front of Edwin's door, a large circular disc appeared, spinning rapidly before it suddenly flared out into a ring. The strange futuristic room filled with blinking lights and cold metal surfaces appearing before them. And standing there was Edna, the Pharaoh proclaimed. Get in, she shouted, motioning for them to follow. Seto frowned. We aren't seriously following the strange woman through the dimensional gateway, are we? You want to stick around and deal with insane cowboy Edwin? Tristan asked, helping Brom lift Odeon up while Renard grabbed Edwin. Once he was sure that Odeon was good, Tristan hefted Duke up. Then follow the new girl. Actually, that is Edwin's female counterpart, the Pharaoh replied. Yuri blinked. Wow, Edwin makes a sexy woman. The others stared at her. What? You were all thinking it. Talk less about my tits. Less yapping and more fleeing, Edna growled, waving for them to hurry it up. Rex shrugged. I'm all for escaping, thank you. He darted into the portal, and when he didn't explode or turn to dust or anything like that, the others quickly followed after. The moment they were in, Edna waved her hand, the Millennium Ring glowing as the portal shut. At once, a quarter of the group was on edge. It's okay, the Pharaoh assured them. Her ring is not like the Spirit's Millennium Ring. He glanced over the woman. I had hoped we wouldn't need to meet again so soon, though it is a pleasure to meet you again. Likewise, though for me it's been a bit longer. Been out of time and space for a bit. There was a bit of a commotion, and Troy smiled as he saw Edwin's father and brother rush forward to check on him. Another Edwin, this one wearing a long black coat with silver highlights, ambled over, along with King Edwin, what appeared to be a female Ash Ketchum, and a man in a blue and yellow costume that, a quick check of his downloads, showed was Edwin's favorite hero, Booster Gold. Honestly, Dez was able to whip something up to keep us out of the multiverse proper, and thus Wyatt's radar. Holy shit, Mai whispered, Selene having given her back control at some point. She was staring out of one of the 2-story-tall windows at the world that lay beyond them. A wild maelstrom cloud of purples, pinks, blues, and dark reds, with lightning bolts shooting through it. Every time one shot through the air, there was a brief glimpse of what Troy realized was another world. Purely on instinct, he began to play Elton John's Yellow Brick Road. Edna, what is going on? The Pharaoh asked. Who was that attacked us, that Wyatt Chaos? He is known as the Gunslinger, a bounty hunter. Edna frowned. We are being hunted. Chaoses. All across the multiverse. And if Wyatt has targeted Edwin, I'm sorry, but none of you can ever return to your reality. Next time, the Chaos Contract.